In Glendale, California, one man built a castle that was for a time only accessible by airplane. Hi everyone, Ken here. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. In 1859, Leslie Coombs Brand was born into a modest family in Florissant, Missouri. At 20, he moved to Moberly, Missouri, where he worked in the office of the county recorder and soon built a small real estate business with partners. His first wife, whom he married in 1883, died only a few months later, and in December 1886, Brand headed west to booming Los Angeles. There, in 1887, he opened the Los Angeles Abstract Company with a partner named Edwin Sargent, and although the financial panic of the early 1890s forced them to sell out, Brand had found his life's calling in land titles. In 1893, his firm consolidated with a competitor to help form the Title Insurance and Trust Company, which would dominate the Los Angeles title business for decades and make Brand a wealthy man. In 1891, he married Mary Louise Dean, a Southern woman, and the childless couple would remain devoted for the rest of his life. By the turn of the century, Brand had trained his eye on a Sleepy Grove-covered community north of downtown, and he purchased roughly 1,000 acres of the old Rancho San Rafael in what became Glendale. Working with his friend and business associate Henry E. Huntington, he brought the Pacific Electric Railway, the famous red cars, out to Glendale in 1904, instantly multiplying the value of his holdings and stitching the little town to the metropolis. He laid out a grand commercial thoroughfare and insisted it be named Brand Boulevard, ran full-page newspaper advertisements asking readers, "Have you been to Glendale?" and stacked venture upon venture, founding the First National Bank of Glendale in 1905, the Glendale Country Club in 1907, and controlling the local light and power company, the Miradero Water Company, and a home telephone company. In December 1904, he joined Huntington, publisher Harrison Gray Otis, Moses Sherman, E.H. Harriman, and other Los Angeles power brokers and the San Fernando Mission Land Company, a syndicate that quietly bought up cheap San Fernando Valley acreage just as plans advanced for the Los Angeles Aqueduct, and when the water arrived, the investors profited enormously. For all this, Glendale still calls Leslie C. Brand the father of Glendale. A king, it seemed, needed a castle. Brand had never forgotten the East Indian Pavilion he saw at the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, a fantasy of the East designed by architect Henry Ives Cobb, and he resolved to build his own version above Glendale. Around 1902, he hired his brother-in-law, the self-taught architect Nathaniel Dryden, and he sent Dryden and an assistant all the way to India on Brand's dime to study the subcontinent's architecture. Between 1903 and 1904, he built the house Brand christened El Miradero, a Spanish name meaning a high place overlooking an expansive view. Locals simply called it Brand's Castle, or the Castle, and the name has stuck for more than a century. The style is properly called Saracenic or Indo-Saracenic, a romantic blend of Spanish, Moorish, and Indian forms marked by crenellated and scalloped arches, bulbous domes, and slender minaret-like towers, all finished in gleaming chalky white. Approaching visitors passed through a large gate, then followed a long drive lined with palms toward the crenellated parapets and horseshoe arches of the house itself. The roughly 5,000 square foot mansion had 13 rooms and 5 bedrooms, and where the exterior was all exotic spectacle, the interior was a warmer world of late Victorian oak and mahogany, brocaded silk wall coverings, handcrafted woodwork, a Greek carved fireplace, and leaded glass windows throughout. The true heart of the house was the solarium, the room the Brands loved best, onto which every other room opened through interior leaded glass windows and doors. Its ceiling frame was fitted with panes of glass and ringed by clerestory windows. The concrete floor was scored to resemble tile and covered at its center by a decorative rug, and potted plants stood on the ground and hung from the ceiling trusses, while during the Brands' years, the space also held a splashing fountain and cages of birds. The great carved fireplace of the reception hall was double-sided, so that its reverse face warmed the solarium as well, and a mounted deer head once looked down from the mantel. That reception hall announced itself with an enormous carved wood fireplace, whose dominant hood was ornamented with a carved shield wreathed in foliage and crowned by egg and dart molding and rows of dentils, its hearth combining stone, brick, and wood. Off the reception hall lay the drawing room, glowing in soft blue tones beneath a hand-painted ceiling. The dining room, painted a rich blue, centered on a deep alcove framed by carved Corinthian columns and a carved arch, with a fixed picture window topped by a cusped, ogee-arched leaded glass transom set above a built-in window seat, one of the most theatrical corners in the whole house. The library carried an intricately painted ceiling and leaded glass windows. It could also double as a music room, where we can imagine a person sitting at the piano playing for a party as guests rotated from room to room. Shaded loggias and exterior porches open the mid-southern California air into the house, and down the hill, in a canyon behind the mansion, Brand added a shingled, redwood-trimmed private clubhouse in 1909, whose billiard room, grill room, and well-stocked bar became a favorite retreat for Los Angeles society and motion picture stars such as Mary Pickford. The grounds were a small kingdom unto themselves, spilling across the foot of the mountains with citrus orchards and gardens laid out below the house. Brand's greatest indulgence, though, arrived in the air. Weary of the punishing automobile drive from his summer camp at Mono Lake, he took up flying so that he could catch trout in the morning and cook them at his own home for dinner. And he did nothing by halves, buying a fleet of early aircraft that included a special ordered Army surplus Curtiss JN-6H, the so-called Hissogeny, keeping pilots on staff and building a private airstrip in a hangar styled to match the mansion just below the house. On April Fool's Day in 1921, he and Mary Louise hosted a legendary fly-in luncheon, inviting about 100 aviator friends and decreeing that the estate's gates would be locked, so that the only way in was to fly directly onto the strip. The invitation even included a helpful map marking where to land, and guests obliged by looping and spinning overhead before settling down. Among them, silent film actresses Ruth Roland and Mary Miles Minter. It was a party the newspapers could not resist, and it fixed Brand forever in memory as the man who threw an airplane party. After being diagnosed with cancer, he set his affairs in order, deeding 488 acres to Glendale for a token $10 and writing a will that gave the mansion and remaining grounds to the city upon his wife's passing, on the strict condition that the property be used exclusively as a public library and park, that it always be known by the Brand name, and that it be maintained as well as the finest parks and libraries in Southern California. Leslie C. Brand passed at El Miradero in 1925, and at his funeral on Easter Sunday, his open casket lay in state in the drawing room, pinked with flowers while an airplane scattered blossoms from above. Mary went on living in the castle for another 20 years until she passed away in an automobile crash in Arizona in the autumn of 1945. Distant relatives promptly sued to break the will and reclaim the estate, but the courts ruled in Glendale's favor in October 1945 and the city took possession at last. Officials opened the grounds as Brand Park and engaged architect Raymond Jones to convert the exotic residence into a public library, a transformation that sacrificed many original features as fluorescent lights replaced chandeliers, acoustic plaster hid the painted ceilings, and window and door openings were filled to make room for shelving. The Brand Library opened in February 1956 as a specialized art and music branch. A long-planned restoration finally got underway in 2012, when the firm Gruen Associates, working in partnership with the preservation specialists Offenhauser and Makila Architects, led a roughly $10 million rehabilitation that seismically strengthened the unreinforced walls, reconstructed a lost fireplace and the painted ceilings from old photographs, and reopened windows into the solarium. A century after Leslie Brand looked down on his city from a rocking chair in the tower, the White Castle still crowns the hill, its domes and minarets bright above the palms. And with that, I'll turn it over to you. What did you think about El Miradero? Let me know down below in the comments section, and while you're there, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an exciting episode of This House.